Well, good afternoon, everyone, and what a beautiful day it is. I mean, I really am impressed that so many people have come out to hear Robert speak on such a beautiful day. It shows the charismatic attraction of our faculty, which is really saying something, really is. As many of you, I think know, Robert is Associate Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences. I did it again, Arts and Letters. It will be Arts and Sciences one of these days. No, College of Arts and Letters, and he's Professor of Art History, and is going to talk to us today, as you can see from the title, about adapting or perishing, or as I like to say, innovate or die. But really, how to adapt to the digital age, which is something that we're all trying to do, of course. Robert's been with us a long time. I won't introduce him in terms of where he came from and what he did and to get here. I think most people know that. But I do think that this particular topic is extremely important. It's something that we've been looking at from a number of different aspects as to how to introduce more technology into the classroom, how to better use the technology that's there, and not to get focused on technology for its own sake, but how to use it in good pedagogy, how to really engage students with the technology and have them a lot more interested. So I'm really looking forward to what Robert has to say, and particularly about art history. So, thank you.
I'm going to be a bit formal today because it's a lecture essentially about lecturing. And so first, let me thank Provost Simpson for that wonderful introduction, and also for inviting me to be part of the Provost Conversations on Teaching and Learning. And thank you all for attending today's presentation. There will be a Frisbee tournament just following out in the larger space of the Learning Commons so that we can take advantage of the nice weather. So my topic today is adapting or perishing, how digital images are transforming the teaching of art history. But a more accurate title would be What Happened to the Classic Art History Slide Lecture. And again, I'm going to lecture about lecturing, so I'll stay here at least for the time, for the initial part of the conversation. In few other disciplines have there developed over the decades such a rigid pedagogical approach. Pairs of unlabeled slides projected on a large screen in a darkened room with the omniscient voice of the professor dropping such key adjectives as divine, or more important, key foreign words such as Quattrocento, meaning 15th century, Gesamtkunstwerk, total work of art, or the dreaded, and please correct my French, œuvre, body of work. That standard setup, by turns eloquent and insightful and occasionally pompous, is perhaps best demonstrated by this clip of the beloved Yale University professor emeritus Vincent Scully. And just a brief look at him, sorry about that, in action. Lecture hall is filling.
Ladies and gentlemen, I see so many old friends here, and I feel thoroughly undone. I have no idea I'll be able to pull myself together and say something coherent in the next 50 minutes. I did want to start by saying that I've been teaching at Yale for many years, but I like this class the best. I really do. I've enjoyed it the most, and you've given me more back, more than you know. Of course, I said exactly the same thing to the class last year. But I meant it. I meant it then, and I mean it now. I think somehow these last few years, whatever our ages, it's been very necessary for us to grow, to see the inexhaustibility of things, especially the wonderful inexhaustibility of meaning in art.
Okay, this is the final part. Notice, by the way, how many times he says the word divine.
The course runs from prehistoric cave painting to Michelangelo. and we have a complete change in the human attitude toward the divine and what's important for art. Now for Michelangelo, it's not the animal body, it's the human body, considered divine. Michelangelo himself was called divine. Piero della Francesca in the 15th century, remember, called perspective divine. But Michelangelo, the man, was called divine in his own lifetime.
5 times 2 minutes. But not to minimize it, Professor Scully really inspired multiple generations of students to go on into the fine arts, architecture, and art history, and for that we owe a great number of very important junior scholars, or to his example. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to ask 4 questions related to this topic, and focusing really on a transition that began to occur around 1995. What brought the classic art history slide lecture into being? What caused it to disappear? What has since replaced it? And then what's next in art history pedagogy? And the first question, what brought the classic art history slide lecture into being? And so, teaching of art history is most often a vicarious experience, since barring instantaneous visits to distant places, images projected in a darkened classroom must substitute for the physical works of art or architecture being studied. It's impossible to stand in the presence of the Sphinx and the Taj Mahal simultaneously, except via technology. Technology, therefore, has been an intrinsic part of art history pedagogy for more than 100 years. The discipline of art history, however, is much older. Its separation from its parent discipline of history occurred around the mid-18th century. Early speakers assumed their educated and well-traveled audiences knew what key works of art looked like, so their lectures were initially unillustrated or perhaps held in front of reproductions. And you see a reproduction of Leonardo's Last Supper in this print of a 19th century lecture hall. By the early to mid-19th century, prints or photographs might be circulated around the lecture hall, undoubtedly causing a great deal of distraction. And I think we've all been at conference presentations where the speaker forgot to bring something or other and something gets passed around the room, and inevitably the entire point of the lecture is lost. Okay, meanwhile, popular entertainers such as magicians were employing a device known as a magic lantern, whereby painted scenes could be projected onto a flat surface for the amusement of large audiences. Photographic slides, first introduced widely at the 1851 Great Exposition in London's Hyde Park, and you're looking at the Crystal Palace here in Hyde Park, essentially adapted the illusionism of the magic lantern to the needs of the academic audience. And quickly, slides became the technological standard by which the discipline of art history began to operate. The introduction of color slides just prior to World War I removed perhaps the last major obstacle to their widespread use. Now painting, and I'm going to quote a textbook here, the queen of the arts, as one of our introductory texts says, could be projected in its full glory. The pairing of slides to draw out nuanced similarities and differences between works of art became somewhat commonplace after the publication of German art historian Heinrich Wölfflin's Principles of Art History, and he would be one of the really patriarchal figures in the discipline. Then lastly, Kodachrome, the first widely available commercial color slide film, was introduced in 1935. No longer were art historians limited to images made available by specialty publishers. In other words, you would buy the same slide of Chartres Cathedral, and every university in the country would be showing that black and white photograph. You could essentially go on site and do it yourself and take details and other kinds of things. We could copy images out of books, we could take our cameras into archaeological sites, public streets, and sometimes fine arts museums with relative impunity. And like many emergent technologies, slide film soon became as popular with amateurs as it was with professionals. And yes, here I am at the age of 12 with my hand-me-down camera. Okay, and that would be my sister and my aunt actually standing next to me. And as you know, Kodachrome even inspired a song by Paul Simon. So second question, what caused the classic art history slide lecture to disappear? Well, the first component to disappear was the voice of the omniscient narrator, and I'm bringing back Professor Scully as my representative here. As younger generations of scholars began prowling the lecture hall and engaging students in active learning. And this interactive approach is now going to be dramatized by the lovely Julia Roberts in the 2003 film Mona Lisa's Smile. Now this is supposedly set in the 1950s, so I want you to note that the sound of the manual slide projector, it sounds like a guillotine. They really weren't quite that loud, but for studio effect, they've enhanced the sound. And also there's a paid student projectionist. This was an enormous cost, by the way, in university budgets for the longest time. With an art history program that could be quite large, it would be thousands of dollars per semester.
What is that?
You tell me. Carcass by Soutine, 1925.
It's not on the syllabus.
No, it's not. Is it any good? Come on, ladies. There's no wrong answer. There's also no textbook telling you what to think. It's not that easy, is it?
All right, no. It's not good. In fact, I wouldn't even call it art. It's grotesque.
Is there a rule against art being grotesque?
I think there's something aggressive about it. And erotic.
To you, everything is erotic.
Everything is erotic.
Girls.
Aren't there standards?
Of course there are. Otherwise, a tacky velvet painting could be equated to a Rembrandt.
Hey, my Uncle Freddie has 2 tacky velvet paintings. He loves those clowns.
There are standards, technique, composition, color, even subject. So if you're suggesting that rotted side of meat is art, much less good art, then what are we going to learn?
Just that. You have outlined our new syllabus, Betty. Thank you. What is art? What makes it good or bad, and who decides?
Okay, I think that's, you get the sense. And I would say actually that's a bit misleading in that professors in the 1950s, a few of them were women at this point, although the field has changed rather dramatically since. Second, she probably wouldn't have been showing just a single slide. It would almost always have been the paired slides. And I'm not sure she would have been showing Soutine. He would have been still a little bit radical at that point. But most of all, she probably really would not have left the lecture stand. That kind of interactive teaching I think of as a later phenomenon. Second component of this classic art history slide lecture to disappear was the pairing of images. This aspect of the art history lecture, I think, disappeared largely due to the emergence of new methodologies, social history, cultural studies, deconstruction. These largely replaced the formalist, stylistic, and iconographic approaches that relied so heavily on visual comparisons. And then third and most essential was the disappearance of the slide itself. The convergence of digital memory, digital photography, digital projection, and digital presentation software during the late 1990s affected all academic disciplines, but for art history, it represented nothing less than a sea change. Ironically, for a discipline comfortably grounded in analog technology, the shift to digital technology was met with fierce resistance, mostly by an older generation of professors who had just barely managed the transition to the personal computer. Many of them resisted the changeover as long as possible, clinging to the argument that nothing could quite capture the sharpness of the Kodachrome image. And at first, they were right. But the quality of digital images gradually and inevitably improved. I had a colleague who used to refer to digital images as needlepoint images on the screen, and those early projectors really were very, let's say, mediocre in quality. Okay. When commercial slide companies began converting their wares from analog to digital during the last decade, and when Kodak ceased production of Kodachrome in 2009, and by the way, Kodachrome, of course, declaring bankruptcy now in 2012, the final death knell for the slide sounded. But happily, other professors, I think, saw this as an opportunity. So what has since replaced the classic art history slide lecture? Simple answer to this is PowerPoint, and more accurately, the replacement is the presentation software lecture, usually called the PowerPoint lecture because that is the most popular of various presentation softwares. And I might add that so completely does PowerPoint mimic the 35mm slide that, in fact, each constituent element is known as a slide when you do the drop-down menu. Now, for those of you who've been around for a long time, as an instructor, I first became aware of PowerPoint via former provost Joanne Gora, who I think was the first to use it on campus, if I'm not mistaken. There she is at the top of the screen. And I started using it in the classroom in the late 1990s, but connected to an RGB projector. And these are the three-lens babies that you see on the screen to the right there, where video quality was mediocre at best and still image quality was positively dreadful. So in other words, what I would do is project the PowerPoint text, kill the projector, and bring up the slide. And it was a way of sort of easing into the new technology. Former President Jim Cook actually gave the art department its first digital projector out of his own budget so that we could get started with a more sophisticated technology delivery system, and for that we are very, very grateful. Now, it's the ability to combine text with images that, for me, was the most compelling reason for leaping into the new technology. No longer did I have to pause in a lecture to provide a name or date or provide written outlines or handouts in advance. And anyone who has lectured generally knows how disruptive to your train of thought it can be when a student blurts out, "I didn't get that. What was that date?" But in art history, it is so essential in terms of the kinds of outcomes that we expect in terms of things on examinations and so forth. Everything I needed was essentially there on the slide. I could pack it with as much information as I wanted, or I could leave it just as the image by itself so that the students would not be distracted by the text. But certainly in the teaching of architecture and urban planning history, the ability to mark up a plan like this is virtually indispensable. It allows me to get through a lot of material relatively quickly. In the meantime, though, high-quality digital images were in very, very short supply. This, again, is still the late 1990s. And so the art department began a project spearheaded by Nancy Shelton, who is here somewhere. There she is, to convert our 110,000 image 35mm slide collection into a digital format. And we are, I would say, maybe about a fifth of the way through, or maybe a quarter of the way through. It's been slow, but at the same time we've been able to supplement our own images with others. And using ETF and special funds, we set up a scanning station. We bought Photoshop. We bought all the essentials for making this conversion possible. And I should also mention that CLT gave us a Faculty Innovator Grant in 1997 and again in 2006 so that we were able to speed the process along. What we came up with is a in-house database known by its acronym MDID, which actually stands for Madison Digital Image Database, and it's shareware produced by James Madison University. We have about 22,000 images in it at the moment. University Libraries, of course, also subscribes to ArtStore, which has a vault of approximately 1 million images of works of art in all media and in many world cultures. We also, in the library, subscribe to AP Images and Cameo, providing access to digitized photographic and museum collections. And as a last resort, we can always turn to Google Images or Wikimedia Commons in a pinch. And as you can see, a simple search for Bernini's David has yielded about as many possible viewpoints as you could possibly want to have. So this brings us to the fourth and final question: what's next in art history pedagogy? I will tell you, and I'll do another plug for CLT here, working with instructional designer Loretta Ulmer in the middle of the last decade, I guess it was fall 2005, we launched art history's first online class, which is my modern architecture survey, and it combines audio, video, HTML, and web links, and you're looking at actually one of the nice features, interactive features developed as a timeline that scrolls back and forth and allows you to pull up some key images like Guimard's metro station entrance on the screen. But in a small program in which face-to-face delivery is still the norm, how might digital technology be used to enhance students' experiences of works of art? Or in other words, how can we move beyond the classic art history slide lecture, be it analog or digital? And so to keep on schedule, I thought I would show you some possibilities. We're going to focus for the next 5 minutes or so on the Chateau of Versailles, and you're looking at a 16th century aerial perspective of the chateau before its enlargement. Actually, this would be early 17th century. If I go into the vaulted art store, I can pull up a very sharp 17th century plan of the city, the chateau, which is actually just this part of it right here. And as most of you know, Google Maps, wonderful, wonderful tool. And if you switch over to satellite, even better, in that we can maybe pull it up. Yes, here we go. Satellite's not cooperating today. It's a solar storm. Oof. There we go. And we are now missing the here we go. Sorry. There we go. Nice aerial view there. Let's go back to the presentation. And you'll be happy to know that I'm still struggling with this. This is a very fussy, okay. Now, I'm going to try to make this work, folks, and let's hope we don't get the, if I want to show the students the fountains of Versailles and switch over to Yeah, it's a pretty astonishing video, and you know, YouTube is an excellent tool. You can overuse it, but I find in certain situations, you know, a short video clip can reinforce the notion, in this case, of light and motion and even sound in a way that you know, no other classroom device is going to be able to do it. This is a nice, high-quality image that's stored in our MDID database of the exterior of the garden side of the Chateau. I'm going to skip this one because I think you all know how Google Map. Oh, I guess I'm not going to skip it. Let's just skip it. You've all seen the person on the street image of Google, And the nice thing about Versailles is you can get up to a certain point, and then actually what's kind of frustrating is they won't let you through the gates with the little man. Or at least most times they won't let you through. Let's see. But I do want to show you this. There are a number of these panorama sites which are quite nice. And let's see. Yeah, here we go.
Just for the heck of it, is the DK that, is that Eyewitness series? You know the DK book?
You know, I think it must be because it's not confined just to art. They do all kinds of things on this particular site, yeah.
That's who it is then.
And the thing that I like about these panorama shots is well chosen. You know, you can pivot up and down, of course, and you can even get rather dizzy if you get a little too far. Standing in the gallery, you're never going to get that close to the chandelier. Okay, you're never going to be able to sort of, I think, arch your neck back long enough to study some of these ceiling paintings so intently. And of course, without getting too dizzy, let's try this. No. Come on. There we go. There we go. Come down. There we go. Nice. Okay. On a better day, we might even be able to see out into the gardens, which would be quite nice. But photography, digital photography, really is beginning to allow us to get into places where guards will not let us go. And I'll emphasize that with my last slide here, which is the Google Art Project. And this has really taken off in the past year or so. The site devoted to Versailles is quite nice, and I had this open before, but now it's gone. Here we go. As I understand it, essentially they take a robot and they move it through the galleries of the museums and various spaces, much like the cars go down the street, and they create this sort of stitched together image of the interior, and you can travel from spot to spot, and through these directional arrows you can move in a little closer. Now, were we standing in that particular gallery, a French guard would leap at us should we even touch this particular rope, but with the advantage of the Google high-intensity camera, no, I don't want that. Let's go back. I want her. Okay, so how do I get her? Let's see. We can really zoom in a way that is astonishingly close. And in discussing this with students how glazes are applied in a traditional painting over an underdrawing, how the little flecks of impasto can be used to animate the features of the face in even discussing condition. And you can see in this particular painting there's a fair amount of crackling that has developed over time. And this is pretty standard for an 18th century painting. But otherwise, most areas intact. You can use this for sort of basic interpretive purposes, but were I running a conservation class or something, I could use it in a much more scientific way. And so I would say that this is where my bag of tricks ends for today, and I'm afraid if I open one more thing, I might assault you with more ear-splitting noise. And so at this point, I'll take questions if you have any. Oh, actually, let me give you my last slide. There I am. Okay. This would make a perfect recruiting brochure, Provost Simpson, for the university, because I thought was thoughtful enough to wear my my football T-shirt at the Capitoline Hill in Rome. But if you do have a question, please wait till the microphone's handed to you so that it can be caught on the camera.
I do have a question, Robert, and I'm Gianluca Dele, I come from Italy, and I'm an engineer. So I belong to those people that go to the museum and get bored after 5 minutes.
Oh, no, okay. No.
But anyway, but I'm lucky enough to have grown in Italy. So at the beginning of your presentation, I was thinking, you know what, when I was studying in high school, middle school, elementary, we were studying this, and then we were going on a trip down to Florence, Rome, and we were actually going to see what we were studying.
Right.
And I thought that, traveling is not going to be, the technology will never make it it will not be as good as going to the place and see what you have studied. But towards the end of your presentation, it seems that the technology is actually allowing you to do things that even looking at the painting or looking at the sculpture, you will not be able to get it. So I was wondering, let's pretend that instead of living in Norfolk, you would actually live in Florence, and you have the opportunity to go and bring your students to see a painting, in front of them. Would you bring them there and avoid the technology, or would you keep them in an office, in a lab with like a fancy technology and make them see the art with the technology aid?
First, I'd have to find a way to fund that particular trip.
Let's
and
pretend
make
the
sure that it
provost,
happens
let's
to be.
pretend the provost gives you all the money you want.
Indeed. Okay. So my guess would be, in a situation like that, Gianluca, it would be most advantageous to work with the students in the classroom first, and then take them to the Uffizi and to look at, let's say, Simone Martini's Annunciation. And, you can, when standing in front of the painting, you really see how it's, I think, encaustic on panel. You can see how thick that paint is, and even how some of the words are sort of stamped into the gold leaf onto the surface. But the real challenge with the Uffizi, as you know, is that often the galleries are so crowded that to stand in front of a work for more than 2 or 3 minutes, you're inevitably sort of jostled by the next tourist group coming in. And so being able to go over it in detail in the classroom, go to the site, sort of take it in, and then go back to the classroom and then kind of review what we've seen and put the two together, I think would be the most optimal way of leading that kind of instruction. Yeah, Carol.
To me, this is a wonderful approach, because in geology it's very similar in that you would take, I have slide collections that are almost as big as the art departments there, and I did spend a lot of time, getting many of them digitized, and not always with huge success either. As you know, it's not that simple. You don't just, especially the older ones where the dyes have started to fade on the old slides. But the new gigapans that they have, which is basically how you put these the last series of images together with the robot, it's called gigapans, where you can zoom in and ever more detail, to extraordinary detail. I mean, thousands of times of enlargement in some cases. Is terrific, and a lot of the times in my field, either the rocks are covered in poison ivy, or they're they're on down the side of a cliff, and you don't want the students hanging over the edge,
or
they've been built over with a new shopping mall. And to be able to take, to have that depth of it, it's not the same as getting out there and getting dirty and, looking at it straight up, but you can get such a lot of information out of it. So I think the technique, that you're talking about is applicable to certainly those fields where visual information is key to,
absolutely,
and pattern recognition is key.
Yeah.
The New York Times had a very interesting article just last Sunday on our student generation, calling them the go nowhere generation.
Because they want to stay.
They had a picture of a young man sitting in front of his laptop and Googling the whole world and zooming it in exactly like here. And when we were still traveling to see all these places, they do it now somewhere on the beach and Google the world right in front of them. So it's the go nowhere generation we're teaching right now.
Let me respond to that, because I want to say that there is a go nowhere generation virtually in every generation. And so I've been sort of slogging through, I shouldn't say slogging through because it's been a very enjoyable experience, but I've been teaching Baroque art for the first time in about 10 years. And it's been a real sort of re-immersion in an older subject area that I've been away from for a while. And in doing the Rembrandt section this week, I'm reminded when reading his biography that he actually gives up the opportunity he forgoes the opportunity to go to Italy because he rationalizes, at least according to his early biographers, that everything that he needs is in Amsterdam. Okay, there are so many everything he needs is in Amsterdam. And there are so many collectors, there are so many Italian works on view there, and more important probably for him, he can collect prints and other kinds of visual images for his own personal use that I think in his eagerness to get started and to make money, he decides not to do the Wanderjahre, or really would have been a Wander Voorjahre. And he's fine. I mean, some would say that Rembrandt lacks a kind of a classical touch as a result, and he never achieves maybe what Rubens does, who has the opportunity to travel to Italy. But some, I think, many more would argue that maybe Rembrandt's a better painter. Yeah.
Hi. I'm Elizabeth Weir. I'm a graduate student in the College of Arts and Letters and focusing on art history. I didn't even know about the Google Art Project and being able to get really up and close with the artwork. As a student who's studying that, I find that really important, especially when I don't have the money or the time to physically go out and look at those pieces. How are you going to implement that with some students who don't know about this project or don't know how to properly utilize it?
I'm just beginning to start. It was just unveiled, I want to say, last spring. Is that right, Anne? Do you think? Okay. And so I've just started using it this year, and sort of in bits and pieces, and keeping in mind the enormous amount of memory that it takes to power these databases, essentially. The participating museums have just gone after maybe the very best of their collections. Okay, so when you go to the Metropolitan, oddly enough, they've not gotten around to scanning their Vermeers. But some of the other maybe more famous Italian works are already scanned. But go to the Rijksmuseum, and they did the Vermeers and the Rembrandts first. So it all kind of depends on what each museum considers a priority. But I will tell you, it's very, if I can pull it up, I was trying to make a point the other day about, with Vermeer's working method, there's a kind of a technique that he uses that is akin to pointillism in 19th century French art. And no slide, or really even like in the highest resolution digital image, could I find a good example. And so I finally pulled up the Milkmaid, and it allowed me to zoom in to the point where, yeah, that's as far as we'll go. You can see the dots. And if we shift this up to the picture, you can see still more dots. You see the basket, the dots, and you can even see little flecks of dots there on the floor. It's not quite a coordinated system the way that Seurat was working with, and he had the advantage of 19th century science, or pseudoscience, let's say, to back him up. But it's the kind of thing that I can do now that I couldn't do even a year ago. Yeah.
So I was one of those students back in the 1970s who sat through darkened rooms and looked at slide after slide after slide, and I still managed to be an art history major, even so.
Yeah.
But I think this is.
Did you ever fall asleep?
Many times.
Yeah.
I think this is very exciting for art history students, and as we talked earlier with, I think Fred and I talked with you earlier about using this for other disciplines. I think it's so exciting. So I was wondering maybe if you could speak just a minute about the amount of time that it takes you to do something like this. I mean, to me, it seems like it would be very exciting to put something like this together, but maybe for folks in other disciplines who are interested, what kind of time did you put into this, and did you find the act of actually putting all this together enjoyable yourself?
That's a good point, and I would maybe even defer to some of my colleagues in the room. One of the challenges, and it's not really a secret, but many of you will find this amusing, is that I'm colorblind, and so I am forever second guessing if I'm picking the right image, from the right database at the right resolution. And I think usually I get it right. And if I don't get it right, sometimes my students tell me that I've gotten it wrong, and I go back to the drawing board. But the multiple sources that we now have to acquire these digital images really make that sort of selection process much more challenging than when I'd open up the old slide drawer and see, well, there's that Leonardo Last Supper, it's turning green, that one's turning purple, if I could tell. And that one looks pretty true, so I'll use this one. And then I'll mark it in a secret way, so I'll always pick that one the next time. It has become much more challenging, and maybe, Andy, you could speak to this. Do these digital images, I always think of it as an urban legend, but do they disintegrate over time as you copy them from lecture to lecture and reuse them in different contexts?
No, there's no loss at all to a digital image. What you have loss with is an optical media storage or a variety of different kinds of media, magnetic media storage. So it's the storage medium that's going to
fail before the image fails.
But the actual zeros and ones will never fail us. We just have to keep recapturing them and moving them onto more modern storage technology.
Yeah, but I will tell you, even let's say with American art, which I teach, once a year every fall, I will spend a fair amount of time just refreshing the images because so many new ones have come along, and that's not to mention the time that I invest in revamping the lecture itself to include new material or to discard some stuff that I don't think is working anymore. It's a little different, though, than, again, going into the slide room, pulling the slides, getting them into the carousels, and making that happen. Many hours went into that, too. Yeah.
I'd like to comment on that from another perspective. I've used this approach, several of these databases and lectures I've prepared. And the problem is that it's kind of like a drug in the sense that you are able to see so many images that you haven't seen before.
Right.
And before you know it, it's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And of course, like all of you, you go through many, many more slides than the ones you actually use. And so maybe you use 50 or 60, but you've looked at 600.
Yeah.
And it's been a great pleasure and a great joy, but it also is a great time consumer. It's a pleasurable way to use time, but I think there's a kind of temptation to it in that way that is a little insidious because you don't really feel it happening until the night's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Questions? No? Okay.
Thank you. As we've seen with you dealing with it, and as I deal with it in a history classroom where I want to show, for example, Paul Revere, his etching of the Boston Massacre, and I want to draw the students' attention to the fact that there's a dog urinating on something which the British did, to show, anyway, it's I find that, as he says, you look through everything, and as we see you show it, we are we're dealing with a generation, as he mentioned, who is accustomed to slick shows. They don't want any, I can't find it here, wait a minute, let me. And that's really a technology problem that I bet you there are resources here that can help us put on a slicker show. Mm-hmm. It's not that you got to have a gimmick. I don't mean that. I just mean the fluidity of a presentation so that you keep the students and they're not staring into space as you're up there sweating trying to find something. That's a challenge.
Yeah, you're sitting next to the man, by the way, who makes all that happen.
I'm taking him home with me, I think.
Indeed, yeah. But you're right. It's the pressure on us as faculty to be technological wizards, to be performers, to be ready to answer any and all questions, no matter how far fetched they might be, is increasing. And it's, I think, why we love what we do, because it keeps us sharp and it keeps us engaged. And certainly the material and the discoveries surrounding the material do that as well. But there are times when, at the end of the week, you're just thinking, how did I get through this? How did I make it? Yeah.
I'll thank her for the comment and note that I've said a number of times, the provost and I have had this conversation where we think that distance learning is the wrong name for the organization that we have, because it has a lot of services for faculty, video production services, graphic artists, instructional designers, engineers, all of the instructional technologists, media developers, and our videography team that's here today, and editors. They're all available for the faculty at ODU and all in the Gornto building. And so now we are building a welcome center and a place for people to actually come. It used to be that you went to the Gornto building and went in and looked around for the office of the person that you were aware of, and now we'll have some space on the first floor where you'll be able to come in and speak to someone and get some help right away. But please do avail yourselves of all of the services that are part of the organization over there as part of the Center for Learning and Teaching and Academic Technology and Distance Learning. We are there to help you with all of these tools and techniques, and we do have quite a few resources. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Other questions? I think, Rob?
Great. Thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the day. It's beautiful.